The topic for this morning is faith and the future. My faith and my future. We're living in perilous times. We're living at a time when people are feeling like the future is just so uncertain. And it's so threatening sometimes to look at the future and to think about the future. I want to introduce this lesson this morning by doing a little reminiscing, going all the way back to a time when many of you only read about in history books, World War II. I was a teenager when Hitler began his invasion of Poland, Finland, and so forth. I didn't know very much about world affairs at that time, and as a matter of fact, it didn't particularly concern me at that time. America was not on a war footing, but before very long, we began building ships. We began converting things from just regular industry to defense industries. I remember when Pearl Harbor was bombed. I remember exactly where I was when we heard the news. I didn't even know where Pearl Harbor was. Well, I knew where the Hawaiian Islands were, but I didn't know anything about Pearl Harbor. Honolulu, yes. Pearl Harbor, no. But I do remember that before very long, there were all kinds of defeats that came to the United States. It seemed like we were pushed back on every hand. And I remember thinking at that time, this is pretty serious. What's going to happen? I lived in Miami, Florida. Ships were sunk right off of Miami, merchant ships. And the oil from those ships would wash up on the shore. I never saw a ship on fire. Some of them did. But I did see the oil up there. It was pretty gloomy. You couldn't buy tires for a car. I worked in a service station and you could only get 3 gallons of gas a week. Fortunately, 3 gallons only cost you 66 cents. I remember when we had to put masks over our headlights, and only a very small little strip of light came out. Why? Blackout. I remember how we could only go 25 miles an hour on the highway because we couldn't afford to wear out the rubber on our tires. Why am I telling about all of this? Well, just to say that, hey folks, we survived. We not only survived, we thrived. How did we do that? Because people looked to the future with confidence. We knew something about our own national strength. And there was an air of perseverance that was very, very important to everybody. Did people turn toward God? Yes, they did, by the way. Churches were full. People talked about God. In the schools, we prayed to God for peace. You know the Beethoven's Fifth Symphony? Bum, 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 bum. Do you realize that 3 dots and a dash is in Morse code, the letter V? And so that became a theme, V for victory. Everything you can think of in the United States was turned toward the war effort. Why is that important in reference to this lesson? It's important, folks, because life is a journey. It's a journey that is unknown to us. I don't know what's going to happen this afternoon. or tomorrow or next week. And so, in a sense of the word, we all walk by faith. And so, when I look at the future, when I look out there and see my children, my grandchildren, I stop and think to myself, what kind of country, what kind of Christianity, what kind of moral, ethical values are my children and grandchildren growing up with? What is the world going to be like for them? Well, maybe that's a little too long for an introduction. I think, though, that it's important that we stop every once in a while and say to ourselves, what is the future like? The future of this congregation, the future of my family, the future of my community, the future of everything that I know. What am I doing to make that future more secure? Not financially secure, not secure in our investments, not even militarily secure. I think those things are very important, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the kind of values that we hold uppermost. I'm thinking instead about the future of the church. I'm thinking about what is my role in the future of the spiritual life, not only of myself, but of people that I know. And so the 11th chapter of Hebrews comes to mind, a portion of which was read for us just a moment ago. Oh, I'll tell you, Abraham is just one of the great men of the Old Testament. The 11th chapter of Hebrews begins with this. Now, faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. Big contradiction there, it seems to me. Being sure of that which we do not see. When we talk about faith, people usually think, I'm talking about what I believe. Yeah, that's part of it. But faith is so much more than that. The writer here is not giving us a definition of faith. Instead, he's telling us some of the great characteristics of faith. Faith, he says, is being sure of what we hope for. Being sure of what we hope for. What do you hope for? When you face the future, what part does your faith have to do with that? When you face the future, is it finances, jobs, economy, security, politics, and so forth and so forth? Is that future? The writer of Hebrews is saying, being sure of what we hope for. That's the essence of the idea here, I think, that sometime we miss. The essence of it is that somehow or another we have to see the future as absolutely in the hands of God, and therefore it is secure. Might not be the kind of future I want. Might not be the kind of future that I'd like to have. But what I need to do is say, wait a minute. Where is my faith? Where is my confidence in the future? Is it wrapped up in my wallet? Is it wrapped up in my family? Where is my faith really anchored? And the writer of Hebrews says, faith is being sure of what you hope for. Now let's talk about this word hope just a little bit. I love that word. You know I do because I've said so much about it. Hope a lot of times is my desire. Hope is my wish. Hope is what I'd really like to have. I hope I can get a new car. I hope I can get a new television set. By the way, keep that in mind. My birthday is this month. Okay. Hope in the Bible is this very thing that he's talking about. Being sure of what we hope for. Being sure. How can I be sure? Well, I need to get my mind off of material things. I need to get my mind off of my wallet, out of the bank. I need to get my mind away from anything except spiritual values that the Bible talks about. This is so hard to do. I know it's hard because it's hard for me to do. And so far as I'm concerned, that makes it hard to do, you know. But where is my hope? We live in such a materialistic society that we have trouble with this word. But what I want us to see is, take the example of Abraham. About 25% of the faith stories in the 11th chapter of Hebrews, that's the faith chapter of the Bible, about 25% of them deal with Abraham. He's a great man. He was a wonderful man. And the uncertainty that I live with all the time, yes, Abraham lived without uncertainty, but there was something that was kind of hovering over Abraham. It was called faith. Well, he goes on and says, it's certain of what we do not see. Big contradiction. Certain of what I don't see. I'm absolutely sure it's there, I just can't see it. I'm absolutely sure it's there, I can't touch it or feel it. But I'm absolutely sure it's there. Now that sounds kind of foolish, doesn't it? But that's the nature of faith. Faith is being certain that God cares for you. You remember what the last words of Jesus were before he ascended? Matthew 28. Lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the world. Wow. That's really something. But it's just a slogan for us too much of the time. I am with you. In hard times, I'm with you. In easy times, I'm with you. In times of trouble, times of sorrow, times of loss, I'm with you. And sometimes we're saying, where are you, God? And God's answer is always, I'm right here with you. Another statement, Hebrews 13, I will never leave you or forsake you. Isn't that a good one? I will never leave you or forsake you. I know a fellow who, he and his wife divorced. It was a tragic thing. And then this man remarried. He had 3 children. And he brought the children to him, and they were just small. And he said to them, I want you to know, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. That was such a comfort to these little kids, because they had such confidence in their father. They were not exposed yet to all of the problems of life and so forth, but they did go through the experience of that divorce, and they felt insecure and lonely. And now the father comes and says, I'll never leave you. You see, it's so easy for a child to accept that, and so hard for us to accept that as God's word. He says, I'll never forsake you. How am I facing the future? I'm facing the future with confidence. As the writer says, with a certainty of what we do not see. The certainty of what we don't see. And then he gives us this great example of this man, Abraham. And if you go back and read the book of Genesis and the story there of how God called Abraham, is an interesting statement that says Abraham didn't know where he was going there in Hebrews 11. He left but didn't know where he was going. I hate that. Oh, when I get in the car and go, I want to know where I'm going. I don't want to just wander around aimlessly. If I go out for a walk, I want to know something about where I'm going. Have you ever gotten lost? I mean, really, honest to goodness, lost? I was out in the woods one day and I got lost. I had no idea which way to go back to the camp. It was very threatening too. But the first thing you know, I ran into a road, just completely by accident. Whew. Oh boy, did that feel good, just to see that road. I knew how to get back then. Well, Abraham went out not knowing where he was going. God just says, get out, Abraham. Get out of your father's house, away from your kindred, go to a land that I'll show you. And it's such an interesting statement here. It says, Abraham set out to go to the land of Canaan, and to the land of Canaan he came. No ifs, ands, or buts. He set out to do God's will, and he did it. Why? Because he had such confidence in the future and in the promise of God. Well, Abraham was a worshiping man. The Bible says that as he went on his way, and Abraham built an altar and sacrificed to God. And then it'll say a little bit more, and Abraham built an altar and sacrificed to the Lord. And a little bit more, Abraham built an altar. When I was a little boy, I had a very fine, wonderful Bible school teacher, and she was talking about Abraham one time. I've never forgotten it. She said, you can trace the steps of Abraham by seeing the altars that he built. There's something about our hope that is tied to our worship. Not to a form of worship, not to an obligation to worship, but to the expression of the deepest gratitude of my heart to come together and praise God and worship God. And that becomes a part of the bulwark of my faith. And that strengthens my trust. It strengthens my faith. I can't afford to neglect to worship God because I can't afford to neglect my faith. And that's the idea here. Well, Paul says in 2 Corinthians, the 2 Corinthians, the 4th chapter and the 18th verse, he says, we look at things that are not seen. That's a good one too, isn't it? We look at the things that are not seen, because the things that are seen are temporal. The things that are not seen are eternal. That's a hard lesson for me to learn. I've got to learn that, hey folks, the things of time, the material things of life, that's not the essence of life. The essence of life instead are the eternal things. These are the things that I neglect. Why? Oh, because there's all kinds of pressures on me. There's all kinds of activities going on. There's all kinds of things that need to be done. And the first thing you know, I just have God in a little box in my life. A fellow by the name of J.B. Phillips wrote an interesting book that I've mentioned to you before. Your God is too small. And when he begins talking about my concept of God, he says, some people have God in a box. I always thought that was a pretty good expression. And I remember reading that, and he's talking about, yeah, God, we put you in a little cubicle over here. You're in this part of my life. I've got all this other stuff in my life that I've got to take care of, but I don't want to neglect you, so I'll put you in a little box over here, and when I need you, I'll pull you out. I'll open the top, and you can come out. And then you've fixed me up, I'll put you back in there, and I go on about. Is that the way we treat God? Paul says, hey, It's the things that are not seen, that are eternal. They don't last just through your lifetime, folks. They last eternally. And so what is my faith and what is my future? It's tied to my worship. It's tied dynamically to my worship. Well, when we begin talking about Abraham, he's kind of realistic, you know. Oh, he didn't have any problems, you know. He's a man of faith. You have walked through there like a sort of just almost like a god, because he had no problems. I've got problems. You got problems too. We're not like Abraham, are we? Oh yeah, maybe we are. Maybe we are. He had problems. He had a nephew who was a problem to him. His nephew was named Lot. And Lot had a bunch of animals. He had herds and had men working for him and all that. And he goes to Abraham and says, Abraham, we got a problem. The herdsmen are fussing and arguing with each other, and we've got a problem here. And Abraham didn't say, okay, Lot, get out, beat it, scram. This is my stuff. This is my land. You get off of it. No, he says, Lot, here's what we can do. Take a look out. Look all around you. You take your sheep anywhere you want to go. And whatever's left, I'll take. So Lot looked around and said, well, what a deal this is. You know, he looked around and he saw the well-watered plains of Jordan. He says, I'll take that. That's the best. I'll take it. Abraham says, okay, I'll take the rest. Was Abraham bitter? No, he wasn't bitter. Lot got all caught up in some things about the destruction of Sodom and all this sort of thing, and Abraham, you know, he was captured in a war. Abraham got his own little army together and went out and fought, and he rescued Lot. Why didn't he just say, well, old Lot finally got it, didn't he? Yeah, he was selfish. He was arrogant. And now he's paying the price. Ho, ho, ho. No, because Abraham was a man of faith. And somehow or another, faith and gratitude seem to join each other. So now we have worship and faith and gratitude as kind of a triumphant here, that they work together. No one doesn't displace the other, but these things complement each other. And so Abraham told Lot, you take whatever you want, I'll take what's left. And then when Lot had problems and troubles, Abraham went and rescued him. Well, sometimes faith means we've got to turn opportunities for advancement. A fellow by the name of A.C. Pullius was the president of David Lipscomb College when I was there. Pullius told us one day about a situation that he had been offered. You see, he was a brilliant lawyer. He was a brilliant attorney. He graduated from law school before he was old enough to get a law license. And so there had to be a special dispensation of some sort made by the Chancery Court of Tennessee in order to give him a law license. He was a brilliant lawyer. He was a gospel preacher, and he was the president of our school. A big law firm there in the city of Nashville came and offered him an enormous salary, if you will come and join our firm. Way under more than Pullius was making as president of that little college. And I remember what Pullius told him. He said, I'm going to stay where I am, because I would rather do what I do for what I get paid than to do what you do for what you get paid. Now, he was not implying that the lawyers were crooked or anything, but he was just saying there are some things in life that are so much more important than the material things. And all through our lives, we're faced with these things. And so I want you to just entertain this possibility. What is it in all that we do, what is it that we can make the future of the church, of the congregation here, more secure? What is it that we can do to make our influence among others stronger? What is it that we can do to build ourselves more spiritually? What is it that we can do to learn to see the unseen rather than just the seen? I said that gratitude plays an important role here. I want to tell you a true story. I'm going to have to read part of this because of the character of it. There's a man who used to live down in Florida. He died back in 1973. Every Friday afternoon, this old man bent over, walking very slowly. He carried a bucket full of shrimp, and he went down to an old pier, and he fed the seagulls these shrimp. Why did he do that? The reason is very important, I think, in reference to one's gratitude as it manifests itself in one's life. Many years before this, in October of 1942, he was on a B-17 bomber, and he had a personal note that he was to take to General Douglas MacArthur. MacArthur was at that time at New Guinea. Somehow or another, because of the weather and so forth, the bomber got lost. Before satellite navigation and all that, they had trouble with things like this. The bomber got lost. Have any idea where they were really? For more than 3 weeks, the crew of that plane occupied little river rafts. Sharks were there. Sharks would come up and bump the rafts with their nose. They ran out of food. They ran out of water. They were about to starve to death. Had a little strength left. No food, no water. This man, his name was Eddie Rickenbacker. And Eddie Rickenbacker had an old hat on. He pulled out over his ears, over part of his face to just protect himself from the scorching sun. And then he felt something on the top of his head. He knew it must be a bird. He didn't move. The men who were with him in the raft, no one said a word. Very, very gently, Rickenbacker raised his hand up and grabbed hold of the bird. And that bird, to read his story, says, we ate everything from that bird, and then we used the entrails of that bird for fish bait. Rickenbacker was rescued finally. He needed to show his gratitude. Why would that bird have been there hundreds of miles from land? He didn't know. But just for himself, to show his gratitude, every Friday afternoon, he'd take his little bucket, go and buy shrimp, fill it with shrimp, and go out and feed the seagulls. That little ritual meant so much to him. And as I read this story the first time, I just thought to myself, how much do we take for granted? How much of the future do we think of in terms of money and jobs and lifestyle and things? Here's a man who had lost all of that and was out on a river raft. Salvation came to him in the form of a seagull. Folks, remember this. Faith, worship, gratitude. These are the elements that make up our view of the future. And remember this, that faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of that which we do not see. Hard, difficult, almost impossible lesson for me to learn. That's what trust is. That's what we mean when we're talking about having faith in God. We're not talking about believing there is a God. We're talking about trusting and serving and being devoted to the God that we believe in. If you are not a Christian today, he calls on you to exercise that faith, to be buried with him in baptism, not as a ritual, not as a form, but as a surrender of yourself to the Almighty, with a vow in your heart that you will live for him and exercise the kind of trust and confidence that men like Abraham had in the future. Let's stand together and sing, please.